And we would love to have Madilyn present her work to the membership, one of our monthly meetings. And they said, yes, that sounds exciting. And so it was that we were able to get Madilyn to be here with us this evening. Madilyn is a recent graduate just a few months ago from Eastern Washington University with a degree in environmental science and biology. From an early age, she knew she was destined to be involved with and study animals. Madilyn states that as she entered her senior year at Eastern Washington, the only thing she was certain of was how excited she was for school getting over with. So, but the first thing in that first semester, that last year, she had a class in vertebrate zoology. She got involved in preparing and preserving bird wings. So those bird affairs, as well as other wildlife research, became her thing. And Elaine wrote this, under the wing, sorry for the pun, of EW professor, she was launched into research on prairie birds, and that's what we're going to learn about this evening. So with that, we want to welcome Madilyn, and she's actually coming to us from Connecticut tonight. So she's on Eastern time zone, but because of the wonderful technology we have with Zoom, she's able to be with us in real time, and we look forward to hearing your presentation, Madilyn, and we take it away.
Hooray!
Hooray. Okay, let me share my screen.
Drum roll, please. All right.
Okay, why is this? I feel like I should be more available with technology, but I'm not.
We don't see anything just yet, Madilyn.
Okay,
you started sharing, but maybe you picked the wrong screen, or
if you'd like me to bump you off, I can do that and you can start over.
Yes, that would be great.
Sometimes that's a clever thing to do.
Okay, let's do this. And then let's do this. It always has to be technology issues.
Of course, it worked perfectly 20 minutes ago.
Oh, I know. I know. Okay, let's do Prairie. Okay, let's go share my screen. Continue. Can we see this or no?
We have the black screen that's, oh, now it's gone.
Oh. No, it's
okay. Fine. Hold on 1 second.
You're on.
Yeah. Okay, I want to...
Victory indeed, Matt.
Victory indeed. There we go. Okay, now I want to accept this meeting being recorded. Okay. And you guys can see everything? You all good?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
We can. Thank you.
Perfect. Oh my goodness. Here we go. Okay. Thank you so much for the introduction. And I apologize for it being a little later, but here we go. We're starting. Like I said, my name is Madilyn Odiorne, and this is kind of going to be a presentation about the bird use of a prairie restoration site in Eastern Washington. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit more about myself. He said, I've always been really interested in animals, and from a young age, I just always knew I wanted to study them. And this last year of school, I really focused on wildlife conservation, and I really hope in the future my career path kind of gears towards that. And my future plans really include attending graduate school. I'm looking at Montana and Texas right now. I don't know, maybe there's something else that's going to happen, but those are two of my favorites right now. So that's a little about myself. And so now kind of to set the scene of this whole presentation, this is going to be about prairies. And if you guys didn't know, that prairies are one of the most endangered ecosystems in the world. And you know, prairies are very important, and they're very critical sources of biodiversity, and they're also really important because they're natural carbon sinks. And so, as we know, carbon dioxide is one of the most prevalent greenhouse gases there is right now. And with prairies, they take in that carbon dioxide through the prairie plants, and then they store it in the soil. And, this is very amazing. And this is what helps us kind of decrease that carbon dioxide. And this is also why they're so rich in the soil. And, this is why all the agriculture is in the prairie lands. And with this rich soil, all the plant flourishes, the insect community flourishes, and it goes higher up in the trophic levels. And one of the main culprits of grasslands and prairies being on the decline right now is agriculture. And, not really to point the finger at people, but it's a really delicate balance that we need to realize, preserving these prairie lands, but also realizing that we still need to feed people and we still need to have the agriculture industry. So eventually we need to find just a balance for these two and really focus on that. And so the prairie that we're going to be focusing on today is the Palouse Prairie. And in this map that I have shown right here, it's mainly in Eastern Washington, but it also kind of spills over into Idaho and also into Oregon. And like Elaine said, less than 1% of the Palouse Prairie is still intact today, which is, it's crazy. All that land, there's only just a little bit of land left. And 90% of the land has been converted into agriculture since the 1900s. And so this is really it's been a problem for a very long time, and we're really starting to realize the effects of it now. And one of the foundations to help the Palouse Prairie is the Palouse Prairie Foundation, and landowners really go to them and they volunteer their land to kind of help them get back that native prairie and that intact prairie. And so they're really helpful. And in the fall of 2016, I believe, 62 acres was donated to them, and now it's being preserved. But we know that much more land needs to be preserved and to be able to have a ecologically viable prairie. And so if you haven't been to the Palouse Prairie, or if you haven't seen it, I'm going to paint like a little picture. One of the defining characteristics are these rolling hills. And I remember as like a child and like growing up, these hills of wheat, you can see them like during like sunrise and sunset, and these hills just almost look golden, and they go on forever. So that's kind of like what the Palouse Prairie is to me. And some of the native plants of the Palouse Prairie are arrowleaf balsam root, which are kind of like little sunflowers in a way, and then also blue bunch wheatgrass is very prominent in the area too. And so with the decline of land of prairies, Eastern Washington University really wanted to kind of combat this decline. So they created the EWU Prairie Restoration Site. And this site was originally agriculture, as you can see from these photos. And it's a 120-acre lot that has been purchased to preserve that Palouse Prairie and really kind of bring back that native, all those native plants and that biodiversity. And one of the slogans that has really been a big thing in this project is it's creating like a living laboratory, inspiring people from not even, the science background, but people all over the university, kind of inspiring them to do the same thing wherever they live. And so what really launched this project was the $100,000 Environmental Protection Agency grant that really helped start this. And so with that, I also have a little QR code. If you want to scan that, you can read more. I think Elaine also posted the link to the EWU Restoration Site website, so you can kind of read more about the background. But with that, I'm going to go into the stages of restoration at Eastern Washington University. And so the first phase already completed. We have that $100,000 EPA grant that really launched it. And then we collected baseline data through identifying vegetation and also collecting soil samples. And a seed nursery was established. And the person who started this, Sarah Hill, she went to these prairie remnants 20 miles away from campus, and she collected native prairie plants and established a seed nursery. And then this 13-acre site was seeded, and that has been done since she has started this. And then this brings us to phase 2, which is ongoing and will be most likely ongoing for a little while longer. And this is the collection of additional data, monitoring the site, and really expanding community partners. So I know that a couple local Indian tribes have been invited to the site to really kind of expand knowledge on the site, and also local schools have come to the site to really outreach and inspire the next generation of environmental scientists, or whatever. And so with that, phase 3 kind of has our goals of restoration, and this is one of the main goals that I think the university wants to establish, is like a trail system so everyone can enjoy this site. Cross-country skiing, cross-country, hiking, whatever you can think of, snowshoeing. People want to, the university wants people to enjoy this site. And with that, outdoor classrooms are also being established for people all along the university to really enjoy the site. And then creating sustainable site management, so we can really cherish this site for a long time. And this picture that just popped up is kind of the rough sketch of the restoration site and what we want to do with that. The red dashed lines are going to be the trails, and then there's a couple sites of the outdoor learning classrooms. And this is also on the Eastern Washington University's website too, so if you want to take a closer look at that, you can look it up. And so you might be wondering, how does this all tie into birds? Like, when do we get to the good part? So we want to evaluate the restoration process at Eastern Washington University with birds, because as you guys know, they're an excellent indicator species. These birds are very responsive to environmental changes, and they have a really important ecological role. So seed dispersal and insect consumption, they're very easy to observe. And so that's why we want to incorporate them in this study. And so the detection of birds can be a little easier than other species. And what I think of, like, what comes to my head is like tracking birds and then tracking mammals. Like, you're not going to see a cougar out in broad daylight, and it's not like you have to track a cougar. But with birds, they're really active all day and they're extremely vocal. And so you may not know what species it is, but you know it's a bird. So this is why they're an excellent indicator species. And so how these kind of go, how prairie restoration and the decline of prairie land and prairie birds kind of tie in, is there's been a substantial decline in prairie birds. A 50% decline in overall abundance since the 1960s. And then as a group, 75% of species have exhibited decline, which is just, it's crazy. And, with a lot of this land being cultivated into agriculture, many prairie birds are very area sensitive, which makes it harder for them to reproduce and actually make this area their home. So this is why, we really need to pay attention to when the prairie land decreases, prairie birds are also going to decrease. And then it's going to, go into other species. So we need to focus on this subject. And so the first kind of objective of this study is to really assess bird abundance and diversity at the restoration site at Eastern, and really monitor progress. So this is a baseline study. And so, in the next 5 years, this can happen again to see where we are in restoration and see if we improved or if nothing really changed. And with that, objective 2 is to also assess abundance and diversity at a nearby intact prairie site to kind of set goals for restoration. So we can use this site to see what birds could be at the restoration site, or what birds can't. So going into this is our site map that we use for the study. And I think earlier in this presentation, I mentioned the 13-acre site where they planted seeds. And this is that 13-acre site. And like I said, this is the restoration site is right on the backside of campus, which makes it wonderful. Like, you know, a lot of students go there after class to even hike or just have lunch. So it's really close to campus, which is an amazing thing. And this yellow line represents the line transect that we used, and I'll get into that in the methods a little later. And then this intact prairie site that I mentioned before in my second objective is going to be Magnuson Butte. And what to notice about this site is it's surrounded by agriculture, and you see outlined in red inside there, this is the site that we use for our intact prairie site. And this is a prairie remnant. A prairie remnant, if you don't know, it's just a piece of land that is not owned, or it was too rocky or steep to cultivate into agriculture. And so this is why we use this site, because, you know, it was less foot traffic. Not a lot of people went there. Not a lot of people know about it, which makes it great for, you know, kind of discovering the bird population there. And another kind of cool thing about this site is it had kind of 3 areas of prairie in one site. So at this top kind of layer where the arrow is pointing, it was kind of a tall grass prairie, which can house different birds. And then in the middle, we have kind of a low line of shrub and forb cover. And then on this top arrow, we see kind of just shrub cover and a grass mixture. So another reason, you know, this land was, you know, kind of very special, because it kind of housed all these different habitats. And so a little more about this background about this site is Magnuson Butte was located only 20 miles away from Eastern's campus, because we can't go farther than that, because we want to really get an idea of what the bird community could be like after restoration was finished. It's located in Lincoln County, Washington. And like I said before, it's this really isolated prairie remnant. When I remember going up to this site for the first time, and, you know, you're driving down this like farm road and you're like, oh my gosh, where are we going? And you get up to this hill, and then you finally look down, and it's just this whole different type of habitat, and you can hear the birds, and it's so live with life. And so I think that's what made it really special about this site. And in this site, we kind of have this, one of the most vegetation that I saw of this was the basin sagebrush, which is this plant right here. So that was really predominant at this site. And so if you're not really familiar with Washington, Eastern Washington, this is kind of a map of where the 2 sites sit. And then the city that's outlined in black is Spokane for reference. So this is kind of where everything is. And so moving on to the methods. For bird sampling, we did a line transect method, which I mentioned was the yellow lines depicted in the 2 site maps on this slide. And these were about 450 meters each. And we were going to do more, but these sites are, you know, pretty small, so we couldn't really do too much. So what really happened from April to June of 2023, kind of during the migration to early breeding season, we went out and sampled. And so around sunrise, we'd go out and we'd walk this transect for about an hour. And every bird that we heard or that we saw, we recorded. And we recorded the species, and then we recorded how far it was. And this is kind of a little graphic of how it went. Like, we saw the bird, and then let's say it's an eastern kingbird, and then we say it, and whoever is collecting data, then we write that down, and then we go into our data analysis. So after that's done, after after we do each site 6 times, then we go into the data analysis. And so the first one we really looked at was species evenness. And this is just a fancy word of saying how many species are within this site or within this habitat that you're looking at. And the next one that we looked at was the bird density. And this was used with the distance analysis. And this really looked at how many birds per hectare there was. And then moving on to the most common, we use the Shannon-Weiner index, which is a very common tool that birders use for diversity of species. And so moving on to the results. So the number of species at Magnuson Butte was substantially higher. And these are all the species that we saw at Magnuson Butte and the restoration site. And so for species richness, we saw just way more species at Magnuson Butte. We had, at the restoration site at Eastern, we had 39 detections from those 6 times that we went. And those 39 detections were comprised of 10 species. And then for the Magnuson Butte site, we had 190 detections, and those were comprised of 30 different species. So we can see just a way greater amount of bird species at the Magnuson Butte site. And then for the bird density, the distance analysis, we again see just a greater amount of birds per hectare. And if you don't know what a hectare is, it's just it's a metric unit that we use a lot of the time in the metric system. And then it's 1 hectare is about 2.47 miles, or not miles, acres. So, and yeah. And so the Shannon-Weiner index kind of indicates the higher the number, the higher the diversity in a site. And so with the restoration site, we got about 1.69. And then the Magnuson Butte site, we had 2.82. And so visually, I want to show you this graph because it kind of really describes the whole, like our whole findings. And so you can see that Eastern Washington University is the blue and Magnuson Butte is the orange. And first I want to point out the length of these lines. The blue we can see stops at 10 on the x-axis. And this kind of refers back to the detections we saw. So of those 39 detections we had at the restoration site at Eastern, it was made up of 10 species. So this is why it stops at 10. And then for the Magnuson Butte site, we see it stops at 30. And of those 190 detections, there were 30 species. And then another thing to point out is kind of the shape of these lines. The restoration site, I want to point out the steep drop. And you can see what this really means is 45% of all the birds we saw at the site belong to one species. And this can really infer that this habitat is supporting only this one species. And this one species was the savanna sparrows. And then Magnuson Butte, you don't see that steep drop, and you see kind of more of an even line kind of. And this, really indicates that there was more species evenness at the site and can support all these different species of birds, which was really cool. And so moving on to the discussion, some major findings that we had was the total number of species detected at Magnuson Butte was 3 times greater than the restoration site. And then the bird per hectare for the distance and analysis was 14 times greater at Magnuson Butte than Eastern Washington. And so what I would like to say is that, this is really not something to write home about. This is not surprising. We really knew that this was going to happen. And, going back to our second objective is we are really using Magnuson Butte as a gauge for the bird community at Eastern when restoration is starting to finish. And so what was important about this is this was the first quantitative data collected of birds at both sites. The Nature Conservancy has went out to Magnuson Butte and done like surveying, but this is the first like just quantitative data that has been collected on both sites. So this is very important. And, you know, this is our baseline and we can only kind of go up from here. And with the amount of species and kind of the data we got, we kind of can infer that Magnuson Butte was an important stopover habitat for migrating birds. And like we heard some birds early on in our study, and then further on the like I think like the third or fourth visit, we go in and we're like, oh, okay, like we're gonna hear the same birds, but we went down into like the canyon or like the little valley and we heard so many birds. It was overwhelming. It was really was, because there was such a high volume of birds there. So it was really cool to see kind of it not be as busy, and then during the breeding season it got a little busier. So that was really cool to see. And then for further research, adding an insect component can really help. And then also documenting breeding can really show kind of how the health of the habitat. We know that Magnuson Butte can obtain a lot of species, but this can also kind of, when restoration is finished, we can see like the amount of insects, and we can kind of compare it to Magnuson Butte. And also just surveying kind of year round to see the bird community, because this can really give us a good, we can really see what birds can be at the restoration site when restoration is finished. And you know, it won't be exactly the same, we know that, but we can get a really good idea of what will be there. And so some of my acknowledgements, I really want to have special thanks to my mentor, Ruby Hammond, for letting me have this opportunity. And then to the EWU CSTEM for really supporting my research and funding it. Dr. Basteau for kind of giving the location of the Magnuson Butte site. And Nick from the Nature Conservancy for kind of giving us access to go to the Magnuson Butte site. And then also Shayna and Bryn for helping us with bird surveys. It was very helpful. And yeah, with that, any questions?
Thank you for starters.
Yes.
Wow. many of us never get to see that gorgeous Palouse. And the less.
The less.
I've learned how to pronounce it better. I'm going to put one slide back up there so we can enjoy. Yes, if anyone has questions, feel free to pop them in the chat, or you can either unmute yourself and ask them for real. Madilyn, do you know, I mean, this is a preliminary long-term study, and I'm sure your successors in the program there will keep collecting data. You've put in some seed. Are you planning, do you know if the group is planning to put larger shrub-like items in there? I think of seeds as being grass seeds, but your sagebrush and so on.
You can see on the website that it's mainly just kind of the grass seeds, and then a couple of the native flowers there, like the arrowleaf balsam root, and then a couple other species. But I haven't seen large shrubs be really introduced in the picture yet. So
maybe Dave or some others know more about that sort of specialized habitat. I mean, when we see the brewer's sparrow and various other things, they're always on something. If it's not a little fence nearby, it's tip of some stiff shrubby thing. But
Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, let me see. I think there's some questions popping up. Okay. Bill, it
yay.
looks like it is very different. Human use. How are you going to control trails are small? So like I said at the end of the presentation, Bill, that we just want to use Magnuson Butte as kind of a gauge for the bird community there. I think that the trails are going to be small, so it's not going to house a lot of people. But I think like we do it, if you don't know Turnbull National Wildlife, there's a lot of traffic that goes in that kind of sees all of the wildlife there. And so you have to stay on the trail. So I think just putting up signs during like breeding season, like staying on the trail, not going off, can really help kind of maintain and keep the nesting birds safe. But we haven't actually established any of the trails, so I don't think that's really in the question yet. So
maybe if I read out the question, it'll come across a little better. Matt is asking, is there an estimate of how long the study intends to continue? Estimates for when you might hope to see changes along with that.
I think from the 5 to 10 year mark is kind of when we hope to see changes. I mean, sooner rather than later, but with kind of the rest, because it's Sarah Hill, the one who started the project, she's not there anymore. So I think it's kind of people trying to get on this project and keep it going. I think that's the main problem we're having right now. But I think in that 5 to 10 year mark is kind of when we want to see changes.
May I mention, if some of you might have noticed that in the chat, periodically it was possible to paste in a website or two, and the last two are Prairie Foundation support sites. And if any of you are interested, if you just poke on those URLs, those websites, they'll open up somewhere in your computer and you can look at them later. Yes, we have a question about method. How do you estimate the distance the birds are away when doing the survey, particularly for birds that are only heard?
So we did use like a range finder. So we like point at and kind of estimate the distance. But before the study, we actually Ruby kind of took us out and really kind of made us visually. We took a rope of 10 meters and kind of really made us think about how far away is 10 meters, how far away is 20 meters. And so kind of to get us prepared for this study. And then we took the device out to kind of get a better estimate on this.
Right. Well, there's a number of people on this web thing that do surveys, and we appreciate how difficult it is to ascertain the distance of a sound. Anyway, here's a good one. What's the habitat like immediately surrounding the Prairie restoration site?
So like I said before, it was previously all agriculture. And so just like the Magnuson Butte site, it is also all agriculture. And so that's kind of how the sites kind of have similarities. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
The one fun or nice part is that Magnuson site is rocky, hilly stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Wonderful opportunity to visit Eastern Washington for some of us. We don't get there as often as we'd like.
Elaine, this is John Houghton.
Hey, John.
I can't figure out how to type into the chat question. So my question is kind of like where you were just going. I mean, it seemed like the Magnuson Butte site had a little more topographic relief and inherent habitat variability that it looks like the restoration site may have trouble replicating. So it might be a stretch to expect that restoration site to achieve the same kind of bird diversity and distribution that the Magnuson Butte site does. maybe Madilyn could comment on that.
Yeah. Like I said before, like we're not expecting like an exact gauge or exact bird community like Magnuson Butte, but with this kind of with the restoration site kind of not exactly replicating this site, we can just hope for some of these birds of that community to come back to the restoration site at Eastern. But we know that it's not going to be exactly the same. So I think that's what makes it difficult about this study is we can't really find, these flat areas, just like Eastern, the restoration site. We don't have those 20 miles away from campus because they're all cultivated to agriculture. So this was kind of just the best site we could use to kind of gauge. But yeah, I agree with you on that though.
Poking around a little bit, as we all might have done, the mention you had of the carbon sink of prairie and grasslands. I ran across this figure, which is just astounding. The grasslands and prairies lock in the soil 2 to 3 times more carbon than all of the Earth's atmosphere.
Yes.
That's 2 to 3 times all the carbon in the atmosphere.
Yes, this is why it's so important for us to really kind of preserve these grasslands and, really realize that they're an important ecosystem. Because I think that, most people are like, oh, okay, like, they're just grasslands, they're just prairies, but we really need to focus on them too. So,
well, I guess that might be part of the inherent wisdom of this study you're doing, because it has been shown that restoration puts more carbon back in the ground. And you're to some degree using the birds as an index of how the top part is continuing to be healthy, but it's really what's going in that's most important, probably. Yes. Excellent. Making us think. Anyone else? Thank you, John. We love hearing your voice too. Well, on that note, Madilyn, gosh, it's 11:30 in your time. Brave day for you. We really appreciate so much you're sharing this work with us, and especially over this time of night for us on bird uses and that wonderful area. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.